Good morning, everyone. I'm Emily Jashinsky, host of After Party and the Megyn Kelly Wrap-Up Show on Sirius XM Channel 111. It's Wednesday, December 10th, 2025, and this is your AM update.
Stupid people like Marjorie, Trader Greene.
I feel very sorry for President Trump.
President Trump and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene showing no sign of de-escalating their feud as the president joins Politico for a sit-down interview. A federal judge strikes down President Trump's executive order putting a stop to wind farm permitting.
It may make people look bad. It may make people look suspicious.
A judge approves the release of grand jury materials connected to the Ghislaine Maxwell investigation, and a U.S. appeals court sides with Secretary of War Pete Hegseth on the transgender military ban. All that and more coming up in just a moment on your AM update.
The holidays are here, which means family time, great food, lots of travel, and of course, a few too many germs. That is why I love AllFamily Pharmacy. They make it simple to stay healthy and prepared. Just go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Megyn, place your order online, and then a licensed physician will review it, provide a prescription if necessary, and once it is approved, your medication ships right to your door, fast and secure. Whether you are looking for ivermectin, antibiotics, or your everyday maintenance medications, they've got you covered. And right now you can save 10% with code Megyn10 at checkout. So while you focus on family, good food, and everything that makes this season special, let AllFamily Pharmacy handle the rest. Visit allfamilypharmacy.com/Megyn today. And remember to use code Megyn10 to stay healthy, happy, and ready for the holidays. allfamilypharmacy.com/Megyn today. Code Megyn10 for 10% off at checkout.
President Trump sitting down with Politico's Dasha Burns yesterday for a wide-ranging interview, and it doesn't appear the feud with former friend, now foe, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia is getting buried anytime soon. President Trump issuing a lengthy defense to criticism levied by Congresswoman MTG, who in mid-November criticized the president for hosting the president of Syria, a man previously tied to jihadist movements, at the White House. Congresswoman Greene posting on X, quote, "The new leader of Syria is a former al-Qaeda terrorist wanted by our government. I would really like to see nonstop meetings at the White House on domestic policy, not foreign policy and foreign countries' leaders. Start by hauling in the health insurance companies' executives, and let's start formulating our Republican plan to save America from Obamacare and ACA tax credits that have skyrocketed the cost of health insurance." President Trump responding.
I've watched stupid people like Marjorie, Trader Greene, or some people call her Taylor Greene, some people call her Taylor Brown, because green sometimes turns to brown, which isn't nice. But I've watched her say that he spends too much time on foreign. Well, by doing that, and first of all, it doesn't take a lot of time. I made one trip. I brought back trillions of dollars on that one trip. I stopped in Japan. I stopped in South Korea. I met with President Xi and ended what could have been a big problem.
You went to the Middle East. I was on that trip with you.
Went to the Middle East. I brought back $3 trillion from the Middle East.
The president then highlighting a list of trade deals and other agreements made with other countries, arguing that work is to the direct benefit of U.S. citizens. Dasha Burns pressing the issue harder.
That's just what some of your supporters and some others have said.
Well, then, I can't imagine their supporters, because I made a fortune and spent very little time. All of my time is spent here. So some people would say, don't focus on anything outside of our border. I like that too. But I've made trillions and trillions of dollars and solved problems and solved wars. Do you know most of the wars that I solved were solved sitting behind the Oval Office desk on a telephone? I think that those are worthy phone calls. Even if they didn't impact us to save millions of lives from another country, and if I can do that easily because I have an ability, are pretty good.
Congresswoman MTG hitting back at President Trump's criticisms yesterday morning on CNN.
I feel very sorry for President Trump. I genuinely do. It has to be a hard place for someone that is constantly so hateful and puts so much vitriol, name-calling, and really tells lies about people in order to try to get his way or win some kind of fight. And I think that's exactly what's wrong in America today. That's what's wrong in this toxic political environment that has ripped our country apart. And I personally think that that's poor leadership from a president. It's a very bad demeanor, and Americans are very tired of it.
Elsewhere in the interview, President Trump discussing his birthright citizenship executive order. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution, ratified post-Civil War in 1868, reading, quote, "All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside." President Trump issuing a Day 1 executive order clarifying that, quote, "subject to the jurisdiction thereof excludes babies born in the U.S. to parents here illegally or temporarily." The order challenged on multiple fronts, winding through the system, with the Supreme Court last week agreeing to hear more arguments on the merits of the case. President Trump offering more on his interpretation of the amendment to Politico.
The case is very interesting because that case was meant for the babies of slaves. And if you look at the dates on the case, it was exactly having to do with the Civil War. That case was not meant for some rich person coming from another country, putting a foot in our country, and all of a sudden their whole family becomes, United States citizens. That case is all about slaves, the babies of slaves. And it was a good reason for doing it. And that's all it was about. And people now are understanding it. It's been explained to them, and I think the court understands it too. That would be a devastating decision if we lose that case.
That court,
because our country cannot afford to house tens of millions of people that came in through birthright citizenship.
Arguments on that case will likely be heard in the spring, with a decision coming later in the summer. A federal judge on Monday blocking President Trump's executive order halting new wind energy projects requiring federal permits. The order, signed on day 1 of Trump 2.0, freezing new or renewed offshore wind leases as the administration launched a review of federal permitting. Secretary of the Interior Doug Burgum also called on to review existing wind energy leases per the order. Since taking effect, many offshore wind developers and projects on federal lands stuck in limbo, awaiting the necessary permitting or outright canceled. Monday's ruling is the result of a lawsuit filed in May by a group of 17 states, Washington, D.C., and the nonprofit Alliance for Clean Energy, New York, led by New York Attorney General Letitia James, calling the order, quote, arbitrary and unnecessary, and arguing it created a, quote, existential threat to the wind industry. The Trump administration countering that the lawsuit amounted to a policy dispute over wind versus fossil fuels that federal courts cannot referee. Clinton-appointed Judge Patty Saris of the District of Massachusetts siding with the states, ruling that the administration never provided the, quote, reasoned explanation required under the Administrative Procedure Act to halt wind leases, saying instead the Interior Department acted only because President Trump ordered it to. President Trump, a leading critic of wind energy, attacking it repeatedly throughout the campaign and increasing the pressure once retaking office. Here, a moment from the president's September address to the UN General Assembly.
The wind doesn't blow. Those big windmills are so pathetic and so bad, so expensive to operate. And they have to be rebuilt all the time, and they start to rust and rot. Most expensive energy ever conceived, and it's actually energy. You're supposed to make money with energy, not lose money. You lose money, the governments have to subsidize. You can't put them out without massive subsidies.
A.G. James responding to the ruling on Monday, quote, this is a big victory in our fight to keep tackling the climate crisis and protect one of our best sources of clean, reliable, and affordable energy. The broader impact of the ruling is uncertain due to the complex web of agencies, executive orders, and policies involved in the permitting process. It is not yet clear if the administration plans to appeal, but a White House spokesman issuing a statement in defense of the president's executive order, quote, under Joe Biden's Green New scam, offshore wind projects were given unfair, preferential treatment while the rest of the energy industry was hindered by burdensome regulations. President Trump has ended Joe Biden's war on American energy and unleashed America's energy dominance to protect our economic and national security. Coming up, a judge agrees to allow the DOJ to release grand jury materials related to the Ghislaine Maxwell investigation. And an appeals court keeps the Trump administration's ban on transgender service members in place.
As President Trump is settling into his new administration, one of the top Democrats in Congress aiming to undermine the Trump agenda is Senator Dick Durbin. And according to our sponsor, the Electronic Payments Coalition, Senator Durbin has a new scheme, a government takeover of your credit card. Today, Americans have thousands of choices in credit cards, but they say Senator Durbin's plan will result in less competition and less security. And that means more risk for your credit and identity. Learn more at guardyourcard.com and consider telling your senators to stop Dick Durbin's government takeover of your credit card before it's too late.
A federal judge in New York yesterday granting the DOJ's request to unseal grand jury records and other information from the Ghislaine Maxwell investigation. Maxwell is the former girlfriend of disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein, currently serving a 20-year prison sentence for her role in Jeffrey Epstein's sexual abuse and her own misconduct. Attorney General Pam Bondi's initial request to unseal the records denied earlier this year due to grand jury secrecy protections. AG Bondi requesting the release again last month on an expedited basis following the passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which requires the DOJ to release all materials in its possession relating to the Epstein and Maxwell cases, with limited exception, by December 19th. Obama-appointed Judge Paul Engelmeyer for the Southern District of Manhattan, citing the newly passed act in his decision to now approve the release of the records. A separate judge in the Southern District of Florida last week approving the release of grand jury materials from that jurisdiction's investigation into Epstein. That investigation beginning in 2005, leading to his conviction on state charges in a highly controversial plea deal. AG Bondi also seeking the release of materials from a third judge relating to the 2019 sex trafficking charges against Epstein. That judge has yet to issue a ruling. Judge Engelmeyer, writing Tuesday, the grand jury materials, quote, do not discuss or identify any client of Epstein's or Maxwell's. They do not reveal any heretofore unknown means of methods of Epstein's or Maxwell's crimes. Prior to releasing any of the newly obtained records, the DOJ stating it will coordinate with victims and their legal teams about any redactions to protect their identities and privacy. We spoke with MK True Crime legal analyst Phil Holloway on what the public can expect with these coming disclosures.
Grand jury proceedings are traditionally secret for several reasons, primarily to protect innocent people from reputational harm. If it becomes public that a grand jury is representing someone who, for example, turns out to be innocent, sometimes the stigma from that investigation will just never go away. But it's also important to keep grand jury material and investigation secret to protect the integrity of the investigation, because you don't want to have people who are targets of these things perhaps destroying evidence or fleeing from the jurisdiction in anticipation of an indictment and things of that nature. So what Congress has done is they have taken that traditional rule that goes back to the English common law, flipped it on its end and say, okay, now the DOJ can disclose all of this stuff.
Holloway contends most of the major facts are already known, but whatever is left to release may pull back the curtain on elements of Epstein's world.
I think they're going to reveal a lot into the sort of the lifestyle that Epstein and those in his orbit were living. I think it's going to reveal financial information about Epstein and a lot of people in his orbit. And it's also going to reveal communications, which a lot of people might find very interesting, salacious. It may make people look bad. It may make people look suspicious, but we have to remember that there's people that this grand jury looked at that the grand jury decided not to charge with anything. So we have to take it all with that idea in mind.
Holloway outlines some possible unintended consequences of Congress's intervention compelling the release of the grand jury materials.
One of the reasons grand jury proceedings are secret is to encourage candor. And by that, I mean witnesses are more likely to speak freely and truthfully without fear or fear of retaliation or any kind of pressure if they know and believe going into it that their testimony is going to be confidential. If Congress turns around and basically removes that confidentiality every time there's public outcry, then nobody is going to feel comfortable enough to really go in and be truthful and perhaps entirely candid when they testify at a grand jury. So this particular case needs to be seen as an isolated incident. We're not going to see the Congress basically opening up all grand juries in the future.
Overall, Holloway expects the upcoming document dump may disappoint those hoping for shocking revelations.
I think that there's so much speculation already circulating in the public discourse. There are people who believe that there are, say, client lists. Okay, there's this like one master list of all of Epstein's clients. Well, that doesn't exist. What we're going to get is we're going to get raw material. We're going to get transcripts and things like that. And it's going to be probably very dissatisfying for a lot of people, I think. And so there's going to be people, because of that, who will believe that there is still some type of conspiracy, some type of cover-up, even after everything is released. There will be people who will be very dissatisfied once all is said and done. Hopefully, at some point, we can move on from Epstein and learn from this. We need to, I think, overall, maybe have some more transparency in the criminal justice system at large. But I don't think it needs to go so far as to opening law enforcement case files every time there's a high-profile defendant.
A federal appeals court yesterday allowing Secretary of War Pete Hegseth's ban on so-called transgender men and women from serving in the U.S. military to go into effect while a challenge to the policy plays out in the courts. In a 2-1 ruling, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit ruling the ban is, quote, likely constitutional because it reflects a considered judgment of military leaders and furthers legitimate military interests. President Trump signing the executive order in January called prioritizing military excellence and readiness, citing DoD policy ensuring service members are, quote, free of medical conditions or physical defects that may reasonably be expected to require excessive time lost from duty for necessary treatment or hospitalization. The order directing the Pentagon to update its medical and personnel standards within 60 days. Hegseth then updating guidelines, effectively banning individuals who identify as transgender from military service. U.S. District Court Judge Ana Reyes, a Biden appointee, ruling against the Trump administration and issuing an injunction blocking the order from taking effect, after an opponent sued to halt its implementation. The Trump administration took the case to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and yesterday, Trump-appointed judges Gregory Katsas and Naomi Rao finding the ban to be consistent with past military standards, noting it has been changed before, writing, quote, the United States military enforces strict medical standards to ensure that only physically and mentally fit individuals join its ranks. For decades, these requirements barred service by individuals with gender dysphoria, a medical condition associated with clinically significant distress. This bar was partially relaxed in 2016, revived in 2018, partially relaxed again in 2021, and revived again in 2025. The judge is also determining the judiciary branch must, quote, tread carefully when asked to second-guess considered military judgments of the political branches. Obama-appointed Judge Cornelia Pillard, writing in her dissent, the ban, quote, brands all transgender people, without regard to individual merit, as unworthy to serve in our armed forces solely because they are transgender. The underlying lawsuit now continuing, where it's expected to again reach the D.C. Court of Appeals and possibly even the U.S. Supreme Court before it concludes. That'll do it for your AM update. I'm Emily Jashinsky, host of After Party. Catch The Megyn Kelly Show live on SiriusXM's The Megyn Kelly Channel 111 at noon East on youtube.com/Megyn Kelly and all podcast platforms.